Guys, I honestly don't know what I'm supposed to do here. I mean, there was a lot that happened tonight at All Out, but I honestly don't know how I'm supposed to sum up all my feelings on what happened tonight. But let's just go through the show and review what happened. So on the pre-show, we had a 10-man tag team match with the Best Friends and Jurassic Express facing off against the Hardy Family Office, and oh my god, I'm boring myself. Okay, let's talk about the only thing that really mattered tonight. Tonight, we had 3 AEW debuts: Ruby Soho, Adam Cole, and Bryan Danielson. And I guess also Minoru Suzuki, if you want to count him, but I don't think he's actually a real member of the AEW roster because they're just working with New Japan at the moment. But when it comes to Ruby Soho, Adam Cole, and Bryan Danielson, I honestly don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, if you guys watched my Rampage video where CM Punk debuted, you would know I was pretty excited to see that. But I think this is actually the first time a wrestling show has overwhelmed me so much that I honestly just couldn't feel excited. It was just too much to take in at once, and I think my brain just broke. Like, if you told me 6 months ago that one of the guys who was in the main event of WrestleMania, arguably the biggest star in NXT history, and a guy who had changed the face of modern day professional wrestling and would come out of retirement, and you said that all those guys were headed to AEW, I honestly don't know if I would believe you. That's pretty insane that 6 months ago, Daniel Bryan and Adam Cole were still in WWE and CM Punk was still retired, and now they're all in AEW. But the thing that really gets me is what all the butthurt WWE apologists were saying in the aftermath of Cole and Bryan debuting in AEW. Because I saw people saying that Bryan and Cole were 2 vanilla midgets, and that Cole was never even really a huge star, even though Cole was the longest reigning NXT champion in history, and that Daniel Bryan and CM Punk are too old, even though they had no problem with Daniel Bryan competing in the main event of WrestleMania, and that AEW is just turning into WCW 2.0, even though WWE did the same thing by taking in guys that defected from WCW back during the Monday Night Wars. At this point, I think it's pretty clear that no matter what AEW does, these WWE apologists are always going to find something to shit on it for. I think it will literally take WWE actually shutting down and going out of business for them to stop defending WWE. But if that's what they want to do, go for it. It just gives us more chances to make fun of you for being idiots. But maybe we should actually go through the show now. So like I said, on the pre-show, we had the Best Friends and Jurassic Express facing off against the Hardy Family Office and the Hybrid 2. And the match ended when Jungle Boy locked in the snare trap and made Angelico tap out. And then the Butcher returned, and the Blade, who was in the corner of the Hardy Family Office and the Hybrid 2, started attacking Orange Cassidy, and Jack Evans was going to cut off some of Orange's hair until some of Orange Cassidy's friends started coming out to help him. And the official show kicked off with a TNT Championship match between the champion Miro and Mr. Redeemed Eddie Kingston, and it was a pretty competitive match, but the match ended when Eddie accidentally exposed the turnbuckle and was about to send Miro into it, and the referee stopped him, and while the referee was distracted, Miro hit a low blow on Eddie Kingston and finished him off with his running super kick. And then Jon Moxley took on Satoshi Kojima, and I honestly can't believe we're living in a time where the GCW World Champion Jon Moxley gets to take on a New Japan Pro Wrestling wrestler in Kojima. And I don't know what it was about this match, but it felt kind of slow and sloppy. But either way, it was a pretty good match, and the match ended when Kojima tried to go for his Koji Lariat, but Moxley ducked underneath it and countered with a paradigm shift, and then hit a second one for good measure to get the win. And then another New Japan Pro Wrestling wrestler came out, Minoru Suzuki, and the crowd went absolutely crazy for him, and they traded blows before Suzuki laid Mox out with the Gotch-style pile driver. And then the AEW Women's World Champion Dr. Britt Baker defended her title against Chris Statlander. Also another fairly good match, and the best part was when Britt Baker hit her own Panama Sunrise, which she calls the Pittsburgh Sunrise, to allude to Adam Cole's arrival later in the night, which I thought was really cool. And then she followed it up with a curb stomp and locked in the lockjaw submission to force Statlander to tap out. And then Alex Marvez was back backstage with Andrade El Idolo, and they basically talked about the match that was canceled tonight, which I was really disappointed about because I really wanted to see Andrade take on Pac, because that was just going to be an absolute banger of a match between two young, hungry, up-and-coming stars. But Andrade said that this Friday on Rampage, he would be taking on Pac, which I'm excited to see. But I'm hoping that because it's only a 1-hour show, that they do still get a lot of time for their match, because I know if you let these two go the distance, they could put on an absolute barn burner. And then we got to arguably the best match of the night, which was the AEW World Tag Team title match. And the champions, the Young Bucks, took on the Lucha Brothers inside a steel cage. And this match was just so good. The Young Bucks played their parts to absolute perfection as heels by cheating and using thumbtack-riddled shoes and trying to rip off the Lucha Brothers' masks. There was one point where I think Matt Jackson took a super Canadian destroyer off the top rope, which looked like it damn near paralyzed him. There was a ring around the Rosie moment where all four men made a circle and just super kicked each other down the line before kipping up and keeping it going. Rey Fenix launched himself off the top of the cage with a cross body. This match was just so good. And I honestly didn't think the Lucha Brothers could actually beat the Young Bucks tonight, but once I saw that they were getting bloodied and they were building up to the Lucha Brothers fighting through all the pain and the blood, then I thought to myself, they might actually go the distance and actually win the titles. And as it turns out, that's what happened when the Lucha Brothers spiked Nick Jackson with a pile driver and pinned him to become the new AEW World Tag Team Champions. So overall, it was just a great match, which I don't think anybody was surprised about, because when you put the Young Bucks and the Lucha Brothers together, it's always magic. I think there are just people that mesh perfectly together, and the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros are one of them. And then we had a women's casino battle royale where the winner would earn a future AEW Women's World title match. And the big story of this match was that the mystery Joker card turned out to be Ruby Soho, and I think everybody was pretty much expecting it, because even before the Joker card was revealed, everybody was chanting for Ruby. And finally, we got to the final four, which was Ruby Soho, Thunder Rosa, Nyla Rose, and Ty Conti. Nyla got rid of Ty Conti, which I'm really disappointed about, because I think Ty Conti especially has just gotten so much better over the past year, and I think she would just make a great babyface champion. Thunder Rosa eliminated Nyla Rose after a shotgun drop kick, and that left us with Thunder Rosa and Ruby Soho. And I thought this was kind of interesting because I'm pretty sure Thunder Rosa was number 1 ranked in the AEW women's division, and her rekindling her rivalry with Britt Baker, this time over the AEW Women's World title, would be pretty interesting. But also Ruby Soho was the big star here tonight because she was making her debut, and in the end they were both hanging on the apron, and Ruby Soho kicked Thunder Rosa in the face, and Thunder Rosa spilled to the floor to give Ruby Soho the win and a future AEW Women's World title match against Britt Baker. So I think all that was booked pretty well. And then Chris Jericho took on MJF in the final fight, and if Jericho lost, he would never wrestle in AEW again. And Chris Jericho's band Fozzy has a guitarist named Billy Gray who played Jericho out to the ring, and it just did not work well at all because the crowd singing just did not line up with Billy Gray playing the guitar. I think it really would have helped if they had like a backing track of Judas so that both the guitarist and the crowd could follow that and they could be in time with each other. But either way, the story of this match was pretty good. MJF had his back worked on the whole time, and in the end it looked like MJF had won when he grabbed Jericho's baseball bat, hit him with it, and then hit Jericho with his own Judas effect to pin him. But Jericho had his foot on the rope, and once the referee was notified of that, the match was restarted. MJF locked in the Salt of the Earth armbar, but Jericho countered into a Lion Tamer submission, and the work that had already been done on his lower back was too much for MJF to bear, and he tapped out, giving Jericho the win and the ability to continue his career in AEW. And then in personally my most anticipated match of the night, CM Punk made his long-awaited in-ring return against Darby Allin, and CM Punk's entrance was just so beautiful. Just seeing him in his ring gear again, the whole crowd in unison screaming it's clobbering time with CM Punk, and then sitting cross-legged and facing Darby, who was sitting in the corner as he usually does. It was all just so beautiful. And Punk even did a callback to his Money in the Bank match with John Cena when the crowd was chanting, I think it was welcome back, and CM Punk motioned to Darby as if to ask him, and then pointed to himself as if to ask or me, which is a great callback to when the crowd was chanting, you can't wrestle, during the Money in the Bank match with John Cena, and Punk did the same thing. And while I didn't think the match was spectacular by any means, I think it was still pretty good for Punk's first match back. And even if it was a little bit slow, I think Punk still had a lot of juice left because he was doing moves that I honestly just didn't think he could do anymore. Like he hit this drop kick that I remember him doing in WWE, but it looked pretty hard to do. And the fact that Punk was still able to do it was pretty cool to see. And Darby obviously was super exciting. I really feel like he's Jeff Hardy 2.0 because he shot through the ropes in a suicide dive like a bullet and even did a front flip senton off the top rope onto the floor. And the match ended when Darby tried to go for the coffin drop, but Punk just sat up and Darby landed behind him. And then Darby tried for a Poison Rana, but Punk caught him and then transitioned into the GTS and pinned Darby for the win. And then Sting came out, helped Darby up, and they all showed mutual respect to each other. So at the end of the day, that's one person down, and I'm really excited to see who CM Punk faces next. And then Paul White faced off against QT Marshall, or Marshall, however you want to say it. And this match went about exactly how you expected. QT got a little bit of offense in, but Paul White stopped him when he caught QT off the top rope and chokeslammed him for the win. And then we had the AEW World title match between the champion Kenny Omega and the Impact World Champion Christian Cage. And you knew if Christian Cage took the Impact World title from Omega, chances are he's probably not taking the AEW World title away from Omega too. And it was a pretty good match. Christian speared Kenny Omega off the apron and threw a table at one point. Christian even hit a kill switch on Kenny Omega, but Omega kicked out. And then he brought Omega to the top rope and tried to hit an avalanche kill switch, but then Kenny countered and hit an avalanche one-winged angel and pinned Christian for the win. And then the Elite celebrated in the ring, and they also assaulted Christian a bit after the match, but Jurassic Express tried to come out to help them, and they got taken out too. And then Kenny Omega said that the only people that ever had a chance to beat him were either retired or they were already dead. The lights went out, and Adam Cole's banging new music hit. Like, I'm serious, I've been playing that song on repeat all morning, and it is so good because it is the musical representation of another one of my favorite wrestlers, along with Jon Moxley and CM Punk joining the winning side in AEW. And Adam Cole came out, and it looked like he was going to attack the Elite, but then he super kicked Jungle Boy and embraced the Bucks, and they kissed him on both cheeks just like they used to, and we thought that was going to be it. And then Flight of the Valkyries hit, and Bryan Danielson came out. And Danielson, with Christian Cage and Jurassic Express, sent the Elite packing. And the show ended with the baby faces in the ring with Bryan Danielson looking up the ramp to the Elite, who had Adam Cole within their ranks. And it was so good. Honestly, up until the end, I honestly didn't really feel like I got my money's worth. Like, $50 is a lot. But with that ending, that's what you call a fucking steal. And as Excalibur said, the home of professional fucking wrestling is All Elite Wrestling. Holy hell, do I love pro wrestling right now. And I love it in a way that I've never loved it before. So let's recap real quick. Right now, AEW has CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Ruby Soho, and Adam Cole Bay. Honestly, at this point, it feels like an extended bit when people say that WWE is still better than AEW. Like, it actually feels like a joke, because I don't understand how any rational, logical person could think this way. It feels like a joke that's gone on for too long. And I'm kind of glad I waited a few days to put this review out, because apparently now Kevin Steen might also be headed to AEW. And I mentioned before how Adam Cole, Jon Moxley, and CM Punk were my favorite wrestlers. Well, I forgot to add Kevin Owens. And I also said that I hoped he would join AEW, but I kind of said that as a joke because I knew Kevin Owens' dream was always to work in WWE. So I said it jokingly because I didn't actually think there was a way that he would actually join AEW. But now that there actually is, it's kind of amazing that potentially every single one of my favorite wrestlers, both new and old, could be in my favorite wrestling company right now. Like, I feel like I should be excited, but this is honestly just too much for me. Like, you've overloaded my brain with too much goodness, and now I honestly don't know how to react. But back to Kevin Owens potentially going to AEW. I'm kind of glad I waited to put this review out, because Kevin Owens' possible departure is pretty indicative of what Mick Foley said a few days after All Out. And that's the fact that, quite frankly, WWE just isn't the place to be anymore. Especially for young, aspiring talent, WWE just doesn't know what to do with them, because they've done the same thing for years and years and years on end, where they rely on part-timers and the same handful of people that you could probably count on one hand to run the company. And when you have a model that exists like that, it doesn't give any of the other wrestlers in the back the chances they deserve. And that causes them to look elsewhere, where they could hopefully find a place that actually lets them show off their talents. And you know what else? I also heard that Sami Zayn's WWE contract is ending at the end of the year. So if all goes well, we might be able to see Kevin Steen and El Generico in a ring together again. Here's the thing, maybe there's a reason why all these wrestlers are leaving unmasked to AEW. Maybe this wrestling company just isn't as good as you think it is, and they know they could find better opportunities and better treatment elsewhere. I honestly can go far more in depth into this issue, and I'm thinking about making a very thorough video essay one day about everything that is wrong with WWE, because I've got a lot to say. I could talk a lot about how a lot of the wrestlers are not happy in WWE for a variety of reasons, whether that's them not getting the opportunities that they deserve, or the toxic culture of control that exists in WWE, or the litany of other reasons why wrestlers have left WWE for AEW. But I'm not going to. All I'm going to say is WWE needs to catch up to the times and make some changes. Because if they think that this new plan of theirs of going back to the way things used to be, where they release all the older talent and only take in young talent that are big and are shredded to the bone with nothing but muscle, then they are kidding themselves. And I wish I could say that they're going to be making some good changes soon, but the thing is, I think the reason why a lot of people still reference CM Punk's pipe bomb all these years later is because it's still so relevant today. He mentioned in that pipe bomb promo how it will literally take Vince McMahon dying before WWE gets better, and I honestly think that's the case. Jon Moxley even said it in his infamous interview with Chris Jericho that until Vince McMahon literally dies in the chair, because we all know he's not just going to retire and leave, things will not change. Bryan Alvarez from Wrestling Observer Live said it during that one promo on Raw where the McMahon family came out and said that they were going to be making some changes and that they were going to be giving the fans what they wanted. Like Bryan said, nothing is going to change. Yeah, for a short time, you might get some good stories here and there, but as long as Vince McMahon is in charge, and as long as this model exists where everything filters through one person, nothing is going to change. I think Tony Khan honestly said it best. Professional wrestling is an art form. You don't create great artists by training them all to paint by numbers in the same way. Filtering every idea and every single little thing that happens to wrestlers through one person does just that, and it does not work. One of the things that all these new guys and girls have said about working in AEW is that they have the creative freedom to do what they want. And that is a relief to so many people who have been creatively stifled and shackled for so long. Because in WWE, every single last idea has to be approved by one person. When Ruby Soho asked Tony Khan, probably out of habit, what he wanted her to do, and Tony Khan replied, "Just be yourself," Ruby Soho said that was so great to hear because she hasn't had that. Because that is the culture that exists in WWE, is this culture of control and this culture of everything passing through one person, and it doesn't work. It makes so many of the performances feel artificial and forced instead of natural. And when performances feel natural and real and authentic, the audience is better able to connect to it. I really don't understand why that is such a hard thing for WWE to grasp. But you want to know an interesting point that CM Punk brought up during the media scrum after All Out? The thing is, during the media scrum, Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole were nothing but gracious and said nothing but good things about WWE. And CM Punk made the point that what does that say about WWE? That even the people that were happy there still chose AEW. Maybe even those happy people who weren't like CM Punk and were burned out and were disgruntled. Maybe even those happy people realized that WWE just doesn't match up to AEW. But either way, I'm super excited to see where AEW goes from here. Because with this influx of new stars, I think WWE should at the very least be paying attention and should at least be treating AEW with the respect that it deserves. Because the thing is, your best brand has been sucked dry, is going through a 1960s remodeling, and one of your most trusted soldiers and arguably the captain of your side in the war just jumped ship. What was that thing that Triple H said all those years ago? That if we don't get what we want, me and my friend Mark, well, we'll just stop watching? Yeah, you know what? Maybe we will just stop watching. Because as it stands right now, like Cody Rhodes said back at Fight for the Fallen in 2019, you can't counter-program what AEW is doing.